All right, we're back with part 4 of the deployment mini-series. I don't know what we're going over this time. Let me just go next.
This one, we're going to do redeployments.
But we already did that. I mean, we're redoing it. I'm joking.
Yes, deployments, we're redoing them. That's the plan. And that is, can be extremely powerful. So, obviously, many factions have access to redeployments, but depending on what faction you're playing, there may be some restrictions as far as like only infantry, or maybe you don't have that restriction, something like that. Some factions, when you redeploy, you're allowed to put them into reserves, or maybe not. Again, it varies a little bit as far as your rule is concerned, but almost every faction has access to some amount of redeploy in a variation. These can be really powerful. We haven't talked about counter deploying yet, but the ability to deploy and convince your opponent to, let's say, deploy their tank busting over to one side early, and then you redeploy the big scary vehicle from this side to the other. Obviously, there are some extreme examples of, let's say you got like a Baneblade or something, right? And you put it on one side, and boy, howdy, do they want to not be shot by the Baneblade, or vice versa, they want to kill the Baneblade early. There are times where deploying the Baneblade is like your very first one, that might be the right answer, because you're going to redeploy it, and your opponent doesn't recognize that, or doesn't know where you're going to redeploy it. There are less extreme examples that still make it very worth it, but you have to kind of decide, if you know you're going to redeploy things, when do you deploy them? The answer is almost always first. Now, let's say I get to redeploy 3 units. Well, that's great. At least 2 of the things that you know you're going to redeploy, you probably want to throw out really early, because they're going to be redeployed. There's no reason to give your opponent, any information. So you want to get them out early. But when you have access to multiple redeployments like that, you probably want to hold on to that last little bit, because your opponent is also deploying things, and they're trying to also prevent you from getting any information until after you've deployed something important. So if you have 3 redeploys, for example, whether that's like the Deceiver or many other options, you want to put like 2 of them out that are kind of wasted for you, because you're going to redeploy them, they don't really matter. But then that third one you want to hold on to, so that you can redeploy something that's like, okay, my opponent counter deployed me well, I'm going to try to undo that. So when is a big thing? Obviously, it also depends on, what gets to redeploy. Is your redeployment effect just the unit that this character's in, etc.? So there's some variation there, but a lot of times when you get redeploys, you get multiple redeploys, and you want to kind of use that, throw some out early, and then hold back for one that you don't actually have a plan for, because the plan is to correct a counter deployment. One of the really big things is infiltrators. If you can redeploy infiltrators, it turns out it's just premium real estate. You want to deploy your infiltrators out absolutely first all the time, because you're going to redeploy them. You give your opponent no information. You clog up the midfield in case they have redeployments or scouts. Even with the scouts thing, the fact that you put the infiltrators out first, they're probably going to put the scouts over on the side where they get to scout. And then you can redeploy them later and either block the scout or redeploy them back into your deployment zone to be like a screening unit after the fact. Redeploying infiltrators is just the best part of redeployment. This becomes extra good when it comes to damage dealing units. So let's say I'm playing the Ravenwing detachment and I get to infiltrate this brick of Terminators. Well, that's pretty good, but realistically, what you should probably do early is I'm going to put my infiltrators out in the middle, and I'm going to throw them off to this side, and that's going to influence my opponent's deployment of, they don't want these Terminators fighting X or Y, so they're going to put it on the other side. Well, when it comes to redeployment phase, you say, well, my best matchup's over here. Now I'm going to pick them up and put them exactly 9 inches away from my best matchup that you tried to keep me away from.
Right, that makes sense.
Yeah, so again, this is like the most value of redeployments, I would argue, is infiltrators. But you can get a ton of value out of redeployments otherwise. Again, protecting vehicles against tank busting, also getting your tank that is tougher to go against the things that can't really deal with it. especially in this edition where vehicles can shoot out of combat. Like if they just put a bunch of cultists on one side, absolutely throw the vehicle over there. The cultists can't do shit to you, and the answer is you still get to shoot out. Yeah, it's a -1, but you're basically good to go as far as like contesting objectives, because if you're a monolith or a Baneblade or something, like you may even be big enough to keep them off the objective entirely, even if they're like fully surrounding you. So you can have a lot of like crazy powerful moves with this. So then we kind of talked a little bit about the targets of redeployment. Obviously, screening. You can screen one side, then screen the other, and your opponent may not be ready for that if they forget about redeploys or if they're not sure what you're going to target. We talked about the aggressive part of a damage-dealing unit and then counter-deploy or redeploying them, I should say, to make your best matchup. And then also redeploying for action and support. This has a lot to do with like auras. So there are times where you can absolutely put out like, units that have auras early, and then they're going to be like, oh, well, the aura for this, whatever the thing is over on this side. They're clearly going to put that like unit that wants that aura next to it, right? And they'll plan for that. But then you could put the unit that needs the support on the other side, and I'm like, oh, well, that's crazy. You gave up your aura. But then you redeploy the aura over, and you get maximum efficiency while convincing your opponent that you're going to do something that you're not, and kind of bait out some bad deployments on their part.
Yeah, no, exactly.
So that's kind of what I got. I mean, if you got questions or whatever, I'll try to answer them. But this is fairly straightforward.
I have one question. Is this what the Phobos captain or whatever does that's so spicy?
Yes. So I have convinced my tiny world around me that the Phobos captain is crazy sauce. There are plenty of other things that do it. Like I said, the Deceiver redeploys 3. The Phobos captain only redeploys 3 infantry. But part of the reason he's crazy, in my opinion, is that you can put him with a unit of infiltrators. So as I mentioned earlier, you can very first deployment put him out in the midfield, screening as much of the midfield as you can, and then this messes with your opponent's infiltrates. So like the premium real estate here is against like a Tyranid player, right, where they've got like 3+ infiltrator units. You get to play infiltrators out first. Phobos captain adds to unit size, so you get to spread out even a little bit more, kind of, and then you get redeploys. Well, after you've messed up your opponent's infiltrating deployments and you've kind of hemmed them into, let's say, like the left side of the board, well, now you get to redeploy those infiltrators to your backfield, preventing them from doing any deep striking because they get this 12-inch aura of don't show up here. And it becomes extremely efficient. It's 180 points, I think, or now it just got cheaper. And it's one of those things that I was willing to spend 100 points on protecting my backfield, adding an extra 70 points or whatever it is now, to not only redeploy this and totally mess up someone who's heavy infiltrating, whether it's a Raven Guard detachment with their like putting Terminators in the midfield, in infiltrate, or Tyranid players that have multiple infiltrates, etc.
Yeah.
Or whether it's something that's just your opponent has a bunch of what's the word I'm looking for here? Like scouting units. The ability to kind of put out, let's say, your first 3 deployments, as long as they're infantry units, they don't tell your opponent anything. Maybe they convince your opponent to do something silly, but the real answer is you're going to redeploy those, first 2 or 3 units regardless.
Right.
So like you're not giving your opponent anything. And for 70 points, that's pretty reasonable. Obviously he comes strapped with other abilities, like the fact that he can use a strat for 1 cheaper. So if that's your only captain, because let's say your other captain died or something like that, the fact that you could just like smoke the infiltrators to try to keep them alive, or depending on what detachment you're using, maybe you can spend a CP so that they could like advance and do an action or something like that. There's plenty of cool things you can do with that unit for a relatively cheap investment when you consider many people are willing to spend 100 points on the infiltrators by themselves. So it's really not 170 points. It's only 70 points to get all of these things.
Well, and then the thing with infiltrators too is it starts to affect later stuff like the jump and whatever.
Yeah.
It really is. It's a lot more than it appears to be when you first read it.
Correct.
But we can get into that more later too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hey everyone, thanks for watching the video. Go ahead and crump the like button, subscribe if you want to watch more of our stuff. We run a tiny little friendly local game store with an online store too called Go for Games. You know, where you go for games. Anyway, support us and have fun. Thanks so much.